Welcome back. Today we are going to get into the resources checklist page that is on my toolkit. And I just want to go over real quick what that looks like and why we're even doing all of this. It is so important to give your tenants the resources that are needed in order to be successful in providing this tenant-landlord relationship. You want to set the expectations upfront, clear and precise as to what you expect, how the property should be maintained, that all parties are agreeing to. The better communication you can do and have this all laid out up front, it's very clear then to the tenant what is expected, and they can make that decision before they even sign the lease if this is something that they're willing to agree to. So having all of this done up front is very important and making sure that everyone is on the same page. So with that being said, let's share my screen. Okay. So this is our checklist resource page. And inside this page, we've got several things. You're moving out and showing checklist. We do this if we're going to go ahead and show the property prior to the tenant moving out, which in our lease says that we are able to do. The tenant is required to cooperate with us. This right here goes into when we are able to start showing the property, when we can put the yard sign out, the showing service that we provide, and then also what happens if they start denying showings. Now, we probably won't do this on the first one. We'll give them a grace period. But if we've got a tenant who then starts being very uncooperative, we will start charging them for canceling or denying showings because it is keeping us from potentially renting the property before they've even moved out. So it does wind up costing time and money. The move out procedures, which there'll be a move out cleaning checklist as well that we'll go over, but just some things to keep in mind, what they're responsible for, that they've got to cooperate with the showings, how they're preparing for the move out, completing their forwarding address to us so that way we can send their statement of deposit and security deposit back. Making sure that they've got all the keys, garage door openers, all the things that we've given them, mailbox key if needed. All those things come back to us. And then also making sure as far as utilities go and things like that, that they have contacted all the service providers and have canceled as of the date that they're moving out. So there's a lot of things that we require, but a lot of things that we are also doing to help ease their process so they don't have to think through all of these things as well. And it just gives them a step-by-step checklist of what they need to do. The utilities being on during our inspection. So we usually do our inspection on the last day that they move out. So that means they can't have the utilities turned off the day before or the week before or anything like that. It has to be turned on to make sure that we have everything in working proper order when we're doing our move out inspection. All of those things are required when we are taking photos so we can compare the condition of the property to when they first moved in. And that's all what we use to go up against the statement of deposit for whether or not they get all or some of their security deposit back. This emergency list, depending on what area you're in, if there's any disasters or anything like that, this is just an easy disaster planning checklist that is important, things to keep in mind. It's just one of those things, especially for people who have never rented before. And so this might be their first time they're in an apartment, to just give them an idea of the things that they need to be prepared and what to do in times of disaster, who to call. And for the most part, during an actual disaster, it would not be you or, property management. It would be 911 and things like that. And then after that, start making the calls to people like property management and the landlord. Our cleaning checklist. This checklist is what is used. This is our standard that we use for our tenants of what we expect and also what they should expect when they move in. So this is a copy that we give to our cleaning people and the staff so that they know all the things that we require. If it's a pre-1978 house and it's got lead-based paint and you need to get it certified, I always say that you need to make sure you clean your way out of the property, meaning don't have anyone walk back through the property until that lead inspector goes out and inspects the property. So that's any property pre-1978. And make sure that you're just doing the final cleaning all the way out as you're walking out of the property, and then don't let anyone else in until that gets done. The cleaning swabs that the lead inspector has to do. But we require all of this to be done. We also require the carpets to be professionally cleaned, but we also have them professionally cleaned for our tenants prior to them moving in. So it's same type of condition. The other thing to keep in mind that's probably not on this checklist are things like what the utilities look like. If it's gas or propane in the property, what levels are they at? make sure that they're the same levels as when the tenant moved in. So there's a lot of things and a lot of checklists that go into what it looks like to make sure, because it could be hundreds of dollars for a refuel for the oil. And if it was full when the tenant moved in, that could be, $700, $800, $1,000 that you'd be losing if you don't have that tracked. So just make sure that you know what those look like. We've got this residential lease inventory, although I will say we don't use it that often now that we do a move-in inspection with the tenants. The tenants have that opportunity to do the inspection. They can take the photos. We have all of that through our software. But this is a good thing to just kind of see what is in the property, the entry, living room, dining room, all of the things, and they can list off what the condition is if anything needs to be done. Per our lease, they've got 14 days from the date that they move in and take possession of the property to see if there's any repairs that need to be done that are still considered prior to them moving in. Other than that, they would be considered if there were any damage done to the property, damage done by that tenant. And then make sure with almost everything that you're doing, at the bottom of this, we've got, as you can see, we've got tenants' initials, landlord's initials, and at the very bottom, signatures from everyone. Also, number of keys that you received and that were returned. Those are also really big things to keep in mind. It just might skew however many is coming out is coming back as well. So you want to just keep track. Everything is about keeping track, writing things down, doing your due diligence, and making sure that everything is the way that it was when a tenant moved out. The inspection letter, this is what we send out. Some of our leases now have changed from the dates, 45 days or 60 days, whatever that looks like now, and what is expected of them as well. Per the lease, although we did go over the application process in the addendums, but this is the actual criteria, I should say. What debt to income can't exceed 50%. What we require is grossing 3 times monthly income. And as I mentioned before, the exception is if it's a HUD voucher, HSP, Social Security, disability, those types of things, where they are then acting as the income source for the tenant. Those would be considered just straight across what the funding is, because that is exactly what they're giving us. Bankruptcies, judgments that we don't even consider. Judgments, we see a lot of that where it might just be a phone bill or something that never got closed out. And so there's, a little bit of a charge that was a judgment collection. We actually require the prospects to pay that off prior to us even considering them as an applicant. We just want to make sure that there's nothing outstanding that could get in the way of us potentially being able to collect down the road if they don't pay. So we want to make sure that they're in good standing with everything else. For us, what we do is we do first come, first rented. Not everyone does that, but we don't just take one application and review it. All applications come in at the same time, and we look at all of the applicants and see what it looks like. So I would say we've kind of gotten away a little bit from this, that they're not put in a screening order. All interested parties submit their application. So the first one that has submitted everything that we need. So it is a timing issue, and it is an issue of the first person could have submitted stuff, but they've left 2 or 3 things blank. Well, that's not complete for us, and we can't follow through. So we've shot them an email and let them know these are the things that we need. However, if someone else has really great credit, has filled out everything that is needed, we might proceed with them because they've got everything in on the first go and they're high quality tenants. So just because somebody put an application in first doesn't always mean that's what we're doing. We're going to go with the most qualified who's also submitted everything in the time frame that we were requiring. Tenant notice to vacate. Here's another document. We can go from month-to-month agreements, change those around. Everything, just remember, can be negotiated. So as long as both parties agree that you can change something, whether someone wants to get a pet partway through the lease. For us, we're fine with that as long as we put them through the screening process. If they want to vacate or what that looks like. Now, there might be penalties involved with that, but we work through what that looks like. And if you've gone over your lease with them, they should know what some of these penalties or additional fees might be based on what you guys discussed and what is written in your lease that everyone's have agreed to. The moving checklist, we always do this if you need to contact a moving company, the post office for your forwarding address, and your current schools, all of the things. There's so many times where old mail still goes to addresses that you don't live at anymore, notifying all the proper people. And then, like we were saying before, what utility companies, have them filled out with the phone numbers, garbage, cable, if they've got any of that. And just make sure that you're giving them all the information that they need. I always like to be a resource center for everyone we work with, tenants included. So it's not just our property owners or investors or any of those. It's everybody that I work with. I want to give as much information as possible so that they can make the educated decision. This gives them the information to be able to quickly and easily contact who they need in order to make this transition very easy. Once again, we'll also talk to them about if they want to add a roommate. This is the request to add a roommate. We will then put them through the same screening process that we put everyone else through. Roommates can be a situation that could be a little bit challenging because for us, we require them all to pay. So just because one roommate doesn't pay, all parties to that lease are responsible for it. So if they have an agreement where there's 3 of them and each one's paying a third of the rent, that's fine for them, but it doesn't matter for us. All 3 of them will get failure to pays eviction notice if one of them doesn't pay. So we can't just say, oh, because this one tenant didn't pay, the other 2 did, we're only going to go after that tenant. No, if they're all signed parties of the lease, it doesn't matter who's paying. It just needs to get paid. So they can have an inside agreement, but that doesn't affect us. So make sure if you're going to have tenants who are adding roommates and what the situation might be, that they all can qualify and make these payments because it will wind up all being on them in the long run if needed. And those are the checklist of resources that I've got in this section. As I mentioned before, the biggest part of all of this is to make sure that everyone has clear and concise information and that you're just providing the resource and information to make this transaction as smooth as possible. This is something that, yes, it's a transaction, but also this is going to be someone's home. You want them to feel comfortable, so the more information you can give them and what is expected, the easier it'll be for them to settle in because they're not going to have to second guess anything that's going on. You've made it very clear. Here's what it is. They can just live their life. The more information that we've given to our tenants and how we've been able to educate them and been a resource center for them, we've been able to keep our tenants in properties well above what the national average is on lease renewals. And we're very proud of that. And it's because of the types of communication we have with them, how effective we're able to give them these resources, and also the types of property and the condition that we keep each unit in. It makes for a very enjoyable living situation for our tenants, and most of which don't want to leave. And that's what your ultimate goal should be, is to create such an environment that you're creating long-term tenants in your properties. It is much cheaper for you to go above and beyond for one good tenant than it is to deal with hassle tenants, the ones that are going to move every year. Then you've got to re-rent the property, get it rent ready. It's just a lot more time, and you'll wind up costing yourself a lot more money in the re-rent phase and potentially eviction phase if you're not just putting this a little bit of effort into it from the get-go and in that communication throughout the course of the lease. So I hope that helps. The biggest takeaway is communication and being a resource center for your tenants and making them feel like this is their home while they're in there. I'll catch up to you guys in the next one.